It was a Friday, the 12th of February, 1993. Just an ordinary day, really. The sort of day that passes by without you even noticing. For Denise Bulger, it was a trip to the shops in Bootle, a town just north of Liverpool. She had her little boy with her, James. He was just a toddler, not even 3 years old, a beautiful little lad with bright eyes and a cheeky grin. Denise was in the butcher's shop inside the New Strand shopping centre. She was just buying some meat. James was right there beside her. 1 minute he was there and the next he was gone. It's every parent's worst fear, isn't it? That split second where you look away and your world just shatters. Denise turned around, expecting to see him right where she left him, but the space was empty. Panic must have set in instantly, that cold, sharp dread that grips your chest. She called his name. James, James, louder and louder, but there was no reply. She ran out of the shop, her eyes scanning the crowds of shoppers, searching for that familiar little figure in his blue anorak. The shopping centre staff were alerted, and an announcement went out over the tannoy system. A little boy, James Bulger, was missing, but as the minutes turned into an hour, and then longer, that initial panic turned into sheer terror. Something was terribly wrong. This wasn't a case of a child wandering off and getting lost among the aisles. This was different. The shopping centre was a maze of people, noise and activity. It's a place you feel safe, surrounded by families and security guards. No one could have imagined that in this bustling public space. Something so sinister was unfolding. The initial assumption was that he'd just toddled off, maybe distracted by a toy shop or some sweets. But Denise knew her son. She knew he wouldn't have gone far on his own. The horrible reality began to sink in for everyone involved. James hadn't just wandered off, he had been taken. The scene at the New Strand was one of controlled chaos, shifting into a desperate search. Security guards fanned out, checking every shop, every corridor, every toilet. Denise, frantic with worry, gave them a description of her son. The police were called, and soon the shopping centre was no longer just a place for commerce. It was the starting point of a nightmare. It marked the beginning of a story that would not only devastate a family, but would also send a shockwave across the entire country, forcing everyone to confront a darkness they never thought possible. A darkness that could walk right out of a shopping centre, holding a child's hand. When the police began their investigation, their first port of call was the shopping centre's security footage. It was grainy, black and white, the quality we'd now think of as primitive, but it held the key. The tapes were scoured, frame by frame, by officers desperate for a clue. And then they found it, a chilling image that would be seared into the public's memory forever. At 3:42 p.m., the camera above the precinct's exit captured a tiny figure, James Bulger, walking hand in hand with an older boy. Another boy walked slightly ahead. They didn't look like they were forcing him. It almost looked natural, like they were brothers. But they weren't. These boys were Robert Thompson and John Venables. Both were 10 years old. They had been skipping school that day, or truanting, as it was called. They spent their day wandering around the shopping centre, shoplifting things like sweets, batteries, and a can of blue paint. They weren't looking for anything in particular. They were just bored. It seems they had already tried to lead another child away earlier that day, a little boy in a play area with his mum. But the mum had noticed and called her son back, and the moment passed. For James, tragically, the moment didn't pass. He was the child they succeeded in taking. The footage shows James looking back, perhaps towards the butcher's shop where he last saw his mum. He seems hesitant. At one point, one of the older boys, Thompson, appears to pull him along. They lead him out of the main entrance and into the streets of Bootle. No one stops them. No one questions them. To anyone who glanced their way, it was just a fleeting image, a couple of lads looking after their little brother. The footage is silent, but you can almost feel the weight of what's happening. It's the quiet, casual nature of the abduction that is so profoundly disturbing. It all happened in plain sight. The timeline is terrifyingly quick. Denise realized James was missing at around 3:40 p.m. Just 2 minutes later, at 3:42 p.m., he was being led out of the building by his killers. It takes your breath away, doesn't it? The speed of it all. Thompson and Venables had spotted him near the butcher's shop entrance. They simply approached him, took his hand, and said something like, "Come on, little boy." And he went with them, a 2-year-old, trusting and innocent. He was lured away from safety with the simplest of gestures, a hand held out, leading him not to his mother, but towards an unimaginable fate. The journey they took with James was a long one, a walk that spanned over 2.5 miles across Liverpool. It wasn't a direct route. They meandered through streets, past houses, and across busy roads. And all along this winding path, people saw them. In fact, a staggering 38 different people later came forward to say they had seen the 3 boys. This is one of the most heartbreaking parts of the story. 38 chances for someone to step in. 38 moments that could have changed everything. But for a variety of reasons, no one did. Not in a way that saved him anyway. Many of the witnesses saw that James was distressed. He was crying. He had a bump on his head, which he'd gotten when Thompson or Venables had dropped him. When people asked what was wrong, the older boys were quick with an answer. "He's our little brother," they'd say. Or, "We're taking him to the police station." They were plausible lies, just believable enough to make people hesitate. One woman challenged them more forcefully, but the boys just swore at her and hurried away, dragging James with them. People saw a problem, but they didn't see the true horror of the situation. They saw misbehaving kids, not murderers in the making. It's easy for us looking back now to ask why nobody did more, but you have to put yourself in their shoes. You see 3 kids, one is crying, the older ones say, "He's their brother." Do you intervene? Do you risk getting involved in what looks like a family squabble? Most people are reluctant to interfere. They assume someone else will handle it, or that the parents are nearby. It's what psychologists call the bystander effect. The more people who are present, the less likely it is that any one individual will step up and help. Each person thinks someone else will take responsibility. And so the long, tragic walk continued. James was getting tired, he was hurt, he was crying for his mum. The boys grew more frustrated with him, becoming rougher and more aggressive. They dragged him when he wouldn't walk, they kicked him. The cruelty was escalating, away from the relative safety of the crowded shopping centre and into quieter, more secluded areas. The journey was a slow-motion descent into violence, happening bit by bit in public view. Each person who saw them and walked on became an unwitting part of a chain of missed opportunities that allowed Thompson and Venables to lead James to the isolated place where they would end his life. Their final destination was a lonely, overgrown stretch of railway line in Walton, not far from Walton Lane Police Station. It was a place kids might go to mess about, a desolate no-man's land hidden from public view by an embankment. This is where they took James. It was getting dark now, the afternoon fading into a cold February evening. Here, away from any prying eyes, the abuse that had started on the long walk escalated into unimaginable brutality. The 2 10-year-old boys began a sustained and horrific attack on the defenseless toddler. It's a part of the story that is almost impossible to comprehend. They used whatever they could find. They threw the blue paint they had stolen earlier into his left eye. They kicked and stamped on him. They threw bricks and stones at him. They used a heavy iron bar weighing over 20 pounds that they found lying by the tracks. The attack was not a quick, impulsive act of violence. It was prolonged. The pathologist's report from the trial would later reveal the horrifying extent of his injuries. He had suffered 42 separate injuries. It was so severe that the pathologist stated he couldn't isolate a single fatal blow. The combination of them all had killed him. After they had killed him, they made a final, calculated decision. They laid his small body across the railway tracks. Their intention was clear. They hoped an oncoming train would hit him and that his death would look like a tragic accident. It was a chillingly deliberate attempt to cover their tracks, to erase what they had done. It showed a level of forensic awareness that was shocking in boys so young. They then simply walked away, leaving James there alone on the cold steel rails. They went home. One of them, Venables, apparently went to a video shop with his father as if nothing had happened. 2 days later, on Sunday the 14th of February, 1993, James's body was discovered. It was found by a group of boys who were playing near the railway line. The scene that confronted the police was one of absolute horror. His body had been severed by a train, just as his killers had intended. At first, the police did suspect it was a tragic accident, but it quickly became clear from the nature and number of his injuries that this was no accident. This was murder. The news that the missing toddler had been found and that he had been murdered sent a wave of grief and revulsion across the city of Liverpool and the entire nation. The discovery of James's body transformed a missing person case into a massive murder hunt. The police in Liverpool, led by Detective Superintendent Albert Kirby, were under immense pressure. The public was horrified and demanding answers. Who could do such a thing to a little child? The city was gripped by fear and speculation. The initial theory was that this was the work of a lone wolf, a dangerous adult predator. No one, absolutely no one, suspected that the culprits were children themselves. The police focused all their energy on finding the people in the grainy CCTV footage. The image of James being led away by the two older boys was released to the media and broadcast on national television. It was everywhere. An appeal was made for anyone who recognized the boys to come forward. The response was overwhelming. The police switchboards were jammed with calls. One of those calls came from a woman who recognized one of the boys, John Venables. She knew him and his family. She couldn't believe it could be him, but the resemblance was undeniable. She called the police, providing them with their first concrete lead. It was a pivotal moment in the investigation, pointing them in a direction no one had anticipated. Acting on this information, the police went to the homes of John Venables and Robert Thompson. Both boys were brought in for questioning on the 18th of February, 6 days after James disappeared. When questioned, they both denied everything over and over again. They were just kids, and they were trying to lie their way out of it. But the evidence against them began to mount. Police found specks of the stolen blue paint on Venables' coat. More damningly, they found blood on Thompson's shoes. When analysed, it was a match for James Bulger. The forensic evidence was undeniable. The interviews were incredibly difficult. The police had to use special procedures for interviewing children. At first, the boys blamed each other, each trying to paint the other as the ringleader. Venables broke down frequently, crying and becoming emotional. Thompson, in stark contrast, remained cold, calm, and calculating throughout hours of questioning. He denied any involvement with a chilling composure. But eventually, the stories unraveled. Piece by piece, the horrific truth of what happened on that railway line came out. On the 20th of February 1993, Robert Thompson and John Venables, both aged 10, were charged with the abduction and murder of James Bulger. The trial began in November 1993 at Preston Crown Court. It was honestly unlike any trial the British legal system had ever seen. The defendants were so young that the courtroom had to be specially adapted. The dock, where accused criminals normally sit, was raised by 12 inches so that Thompson and Venables could see over the top. They were flanked by social workers instead of prison guards. They were referred to not by their names, but as Child A and Child B, in an attempt to protect their identities. But the gravity of the crime meant that the formality and horror of the proceedings were inescapable. The prosecution laid out the evidence meticulously. They played the haunting CCTV footage. They detailed the 38 witness sightings along the 2.5-mile walk. They presented the forensic evidence, the paint on the clothing, the blood on the shoes, and they had to describe the terrible injuries James had sustained. The details were so gruesome that several members of the jury were visibly distressed, some breaking down in tears. Throughout the trial, the two boys had very different reactions. Venables often cried, looking distressed and overwhelmed. Thompson, on the other hand, appeared detached and unemotional, watching the proceedings with an unnerving stillness. The defense lawyers had an almost impossible task. They couldn't deny that the boys had taken James and were present when he died. Instead, they argued that the boys were too young to understand the finality of their actions. The legal principle in question was doli incapax, a presumption in law that a child between 10 and 14 is incapable of committing a crime because they don't know the difference between right and wrong. The prosecution had to prove that the boys knew what they were doing was seriously wrong. The act of laying James on the railway tracks to fake an accident became a key piece of evidence to counter this. On the 24th of November 1993, after a 17-day trial, the jury delivered their verdict. Both Robert Thompson and John Venables were found guilty of abduction and murder. The judge, Mr. Justice Morland, took the highly unusual step of lifting the anonymity order, allowing their names and photographs to be published. He said it was in the public interest. He sentenced them to be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure, the standard sentence for juveniles convicted of murder. In his closing remarks, he described the murder as an act of unparalleled evil and barbarity. The two boys became the youngest convicted murderers in modern British history. After the trial, Thompson and Venables were sent to separate secure children's homes. They were no longer Child A and Child B. They were now two of the most notorious killers in the country. Their sentence, detention at Her Majesty's pleasure, meant they would be held indefinitely, with their release dependent on them showing they were no longer a danger to the public. They spent the next 8 years in these units, receiving therapy, education, and psychiatric treatment. The goal was rehabilitation. The system was trying to turn two child killers into reformed adults who could one day re-enter society. It was a hugely controversial idea. In 2001, when they both turned 18, they became eligible for release. A parole board hearing was held, overseen by the Lord Chief Justice. After reviewing reports from psychiatrists and social workers who had worked with the boys for years, the board concluded that they had made significant progress and were no longer a threat. The decision was made to release them. This caused a massive public outcry. Many people felt that they should never be freed. To protect them from vigilante attacks, the High Court granted them a lifelong anonymity order, one of the strictest ever issued. They were given new identities, new lives, and released back into the community. For Robert Thompson, the anonymity has held. Since his release in 2001, he has, as far as the public knows, stayed out of trouble. He has never been identified, and his whereabouts remain a secret. He has seemingly managed to live a quiet, unremarkable life under his new identity, completely disappearing from the public eye. This is what the justice system hoped for, a successful rehabilitation. He has never re-offended, and in the eyes of the law, he has paid his debt to society. For many, though, the fact that he is living freely somewhere is a bitter pill to swallow. John Venables' story, however, is very different. His life after release has been troubled. In 2010, the country was shocked to learn that he had been sent back to prison. He had been arrested for possessing and distributing indecent images of children. His anonymity was temporarily lifted for the court case, and the public's worst fears seemed to have been realized. He was jailed for 2 years. Then, in 2017, it happened again. He was arrested for the same type of offense and was jailed for a further 40 months. These reoffenses reignited the debate about whether he could ever be truly rehabilitated and whether he should ever have been released in the first place. While Thompson and Venables were given a chance to start new lives, the Bulger family was left with a life sentence of their own. For James' parents, Denise and Ralph, the grief has been a constant, inescapable presence. They have had to endure not only the loss of their son in the most horrific way imaginable, but also the decades of legal battles, parole hearings, and the constant media attention. Every time one of the killers' names is in the news, their wounds are reopened. Denise, in particular, has become a powerful and tireless campaigner, fighting for what she sees as justice for James. The case forced a massive debate in the UK about children who commit serious crimes. It challenged the very foundations of the youth justice system. Before 1993, the focus was almost entirely on welfare and rehabilitation. But the sheer horror of this crime shifted public opinion dramatically. There was a demand for a tougher stance, for punishment over rehabilitation. This led to significant legal reforms. The principle of doli in capax, the idea that young children can't be held responsible for their crimes, was abolished in 1998. The age of criminal responsibility in the UK, which is 10, became a subject of intense international scrutiny, as it's one of the lowest in Europe. The central question that the case raised, and one we still grapple with today, is about the nature of evil. Can a 10-year-old child be truly evil, or are they a product of their environment? The backgrounds of Thompson and Venables were examined in minute detail. Both came from troubled, unstable homes. They were exposed to dysfunction and allegedly violence from a young age. This led to a nature versus nurture debate. Were they born bad, or were they made bad by their upbringing? There are no easy answers, and experts remain divided. The case forces us to look at uncomfortable truths about childhood, neglect, and the origins of violent behavior. This debate continues to shape our justice system. Every time a young person commits a serious crime, the Bulger case is invoked. It has become the benchmark against which all other juvenile crimes are measured. It frames the conversation around sentencing, anonymity for young offenders, and the possibility of rehabilitation. The public's anger and fear, stoked by this case, have created a political climate where being tough on crime is often seen as the only acceptable response, sometimes at the expense of a more nuanced understanding of why young people commit terrible acts. The shadow of this case hangs over every aspect of youth justice in Britain. Today, more than 30 years since that dreadful February day, the James Bulger case remains a deep scar on the British psyche. It's a story that has been passed down through generations. People who were children themselves in 1993 remember the fear it created. Parents held their own children a little tighter. The grainy CCTV image of James being led away by a boy his own size became a symbol of innocence lost, a terrifying reminder that monsters don't always look like monsters. They can look like 10-year-old schoolboys. The case fundamentally changed the way society viewed the safety of children and the nature of childhood itself. The ongoing grief of James's family is a powerful and public part of this legacy. Denise Fergus, his mother, has ensured that her son is never forgotten. Through her campaigning and her public statements, she keeps his memory alive. She fights for changes to the justice system and for the rights of victims' families. Her pain is still so raw, so visible, and it serves as a constant reminder that for the families of murder victims, the story never ends. The legal proceedings may be over, but their loss is permanent. Her strength in the face of such unimaginable tragedy has been an inspiration to many. And what of the killers? One has vanished into a new life, a ghost in the system. The other has repeatedly been drawn back into the world of crime. His name a byword for failure and recidivism. The starkly different paths of Thompson and Venables leave us with more questions than answers. Can true rehabilitation ever be possible for someone who has committed such a crime at such a young age? Does giving them anonymity and a new start work, or does it simply hide a continuing danger? The case of John Venables, in particular, has seriously undermined public confidence in the ability of the system to manage its most dangerous offenders. Ultimately, the story of James Bulger is a tragedy with no redemption. It's a story of a beautiful little boy whose life was stolen, a family shattered by grief, and two children who committed an act so evil it defies understanding. It leaves us with profound and unsettling questions about human nature, responsibility, and the capacity for darkness that can exist even in the very young. Why did they do it? It's the one question that has never been satisfactorily answered, and perhaps it never can be. The case remains a haunting and powerful reminder of the fragility of innocence and the depths of human cruelty.